YaHuWaH thundered from the heavens. YaHuWaH thundered from the heavens. The Most High sent forth His voice. The Most High sent forth His voice. He sent out His arrows and scattered them. He sent lightning and confused them.
Shalom, and welcome to the Feast of YaHuWaH series. In this lesson, we are going to look at Yom Teruah, that is the Day of Trumpets, the day of sounding the alarm, sounding the cry. The great watchman on the wall would sound the shofar blast to let the people know that the time of YaHuWaH had come. The day of YaHuWaH is at hand, and that time heralds in the time period of the fasting and repentance, the 10 days that lead up to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when YaHuWaH Elohim opens the scrolls and judges the people of all flesh according to the works which they have done. And YaHuWaH, the great judge, will have his final say. And the time of Yom Teruah, the time of the trumpet blast, the time of the great alarm, the time of the warning cry, is to let the people know it is time to wake up. It is time to wake up. That time period of repentance, that door is starting to close. You better make everything right. You better prepare because the day of YaHuWaH is at hand. So that shofar sound, that teruah blast that was serving to wake the people up, to get them ready, to call them to repentance, is also the same blast that would be used to announce the coming of the great sovereign, the ruler, the Melech, who is, some people would call a king, YaHuWaH Elohim. It is his particular, his own sound, the sound that heralds in his presence, heralds in his esteem, his very image and likeness and word manifest at the sound of the teruah blast, the sound of the great alarm. And we'll see this in the scriptures. And this time that we are in is very prophetic because we are in the Achrit Yamim. We are in the latter days. We are in the times that the prophets spoke for, that they looked for, that they prophesied concerning when the day of YaHuWaH would come. We are in that wicked and adulterous generation that the scriptures spoke of. We are in the time when Sodom and Gomorrah is making their final stand, when the Tower of Babylon is being reconstructed by the wicked people of the earth, and the sovereigns of the earth are all gathering together. And we know that the words of the prophets shall come to pass, that the great day of YaHuWaH is fastly approaching. Do not be deceived concerning what the false prophets are saying, the smooth things that they prophesy when they say that you will not see tribulation and you will not see the sword and you will not see the famine and you will not see these things, because we know according to the word of YaHuWaH that these things are coming upon the land. But we know that if we walk with him, if we stay in him, if we abide in him, that he will provide our every need, because he is YaHuWaH Yarah, he is YaHuWaH our provider, and he will provide everything according to his great esteem. He is El Shaddai, the all-sufficient one. And that is why we put our hope and our trust in him, because the great day of darkness is coming. The day when the sun will no longer give its light and the moon shall turn to blood, and there shall be weeping and wailing and destruction on the earth. According to all that has been prophesied, it shall be. And we know that this time that we are coming in, there will be relief at the sound of the teruah blast, at the sound of that great Yom Teruah which is to come. And we put our expectation into this time, the time of YaHuWaH, when he rules and reigns on the earth, when he sets up his sovereign on Mount Zion, on Mount Zion, and he rules and reigns over the nations. And he puts them into subjection to YaHuWaH's Torah, to his way. That is what Yom Teruah is all about. That is what Yom Teruah is all about, the day of trumpets, the day of the trumpet blast, the great sounding of the alarm, the sounding of the cry, the entire revelation of the watchman being on the wall. It is all summed up in the reality that we are in the latter days and that the time is approaching, and that it is a reference and a picture and a foreshadowing and a rehearsal for the day of YaHuWaH. And we are going to discover that in this series, because the fall feasts are so prophetic, because they all point to a time that is yet to come, a time that is yet to be fulfilled. In Vayikra, Leviticus, which is the base text for this entire series we have already studied all the way through until verse 23, and that's where we're going to pick up. And we have studied all of the spring feast already. We even looked at the true Rosh Hashanah, which is the new year, the head of the year, and the Rosh Chodesh, which is the new month or the new moon. We've already looked at this in great detail. We're going to talk about it a little bit further here. Some people today call Yom Teruah Rosh Hashanah, which is the new year. And actually, when I say some people, the reality is that all of the Yahudim, the Jews on the earth today, they call this time Rosh Hashanah, with the exception of a few who still maintain the phrase Yom Teruah. But the reason that it is seen as a new year is because it is a time, it is not necessarily seen as the new year because they know it is the 7th month, but it is seen as the new civil year because of so much that happens here, and they put such great significance upon it. And that is the reasoning. But because the terminology Rosh Hashanah can be misleading because it is not found in the scriptures, you will not hear me reference it as that. It is Yom Teruah. That is what the Torah calls it. That is what the prophets call it. That is what I will call it. But I just wanted to let you know, because we've already studied Rosh Hashanah in great detail. Rosh Hashanah, the new year, we're going to look at that in a moment, is in the month of Abib, that is in the spring. So this is in the 7th month, according to the Torah. It says, and YaHuWaH spoke to Moshe, saying in verse 23, speak to the children of Yisrael or Yasharel, saying in the 7th month. So we know that this time period is definitely not in the 1st month of the year. It is in the 7th month. On the 1st day of the month, you have a rest, a remembrance of blowing of trumpets, a set apart gathering. Now let's look at that literally in the Hebrew, in the Ivrit. B'chodesh hashavi'i be'achad l'chodesh yihyeh lachem sabaton zikron teruah mikra kodesh. B'chodesh literally means in the month, or as we have discovered in our study on Rosh Chodesh, the new moon and the new month, and also in our study on the new year, the Rosh Hashanah, that Chodesh refers to not only the month, but the moon cycle, specifically the very first piece of light that hits the moon in its cycle that it goes through of 30 days. This is, or 29.5 to be exact. So B'chodesh is talking about the new moon, the first piece of light. We're going to look at that even further in a moment. Hashavi'i be'echad, in the 7th and the 1st, l'chodesh, of the month, unto the month, literally, but of the month. Yihyeh, it shall be lechem, unto you, Shabbaton. Shabbaton, or Shabbaton, is literally a type of Sabbath. You can even hear the reference with the word Shabbat, which is Sabbath, and the word Shabbaton. It is literally a day when no servile work can be done. And we're going to look at what that means even further in a moment as well. Okay, so it is Lechem Shabbaton, is unto you a Sabbath, or a type of Shabbaton in which no work can be done. Zikron, a memorial, Teruah, which is literally not just the word for trumpet. It is not the standard word for trumpet, but rather what it is a type of blast on the trumpet. Is a blast that literally is a broken blast made up of 9 consecutive sounds that are to serve as a warning, to serve as a sound to go to war and to prepare for war. So it is a Zikron Teruah. It is a day of a memorial of this particular type of blast on the trumpet. Mikra Kodesh, a set apart gathering. That word Mikra can also mean that it is a rehearsal or a gathering. And so therefore, we know that we are rehearsing for a future event, a future time. When we did our study on the spring feast, specifically on Pesach, which is Passover, and Hagmatzot, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you see that there is an entire narrative regarding why we observe the Passover. And it is all to do with the fact that Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Yasharel, the children of Israel, were in Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, as slaves. And YaHuWaH, with a mighty right hand, redeemed them out of the land. And he did so through the offering of the Passover lamb. The children of Israel, they were to slaughter a lamb, a perfect one, and they were to take the blood and apply it to the doorpost of the home. And in that night, YaHuWaH Elohim would judge the firstborn of man and beast in the land of Mitzrayim, which is Egypt. And when he saw the blood of the Passover lamb, he passed over his people. And so therefore, they were to always remember forever this, because YaHuWaH Elohim had redeemed them with a mighty right hand through the Passover lamb. So the ordinance was to stand forever. However, no such narrative is given to us as to why Yom Teruah is of so much importance. There's a lot of speculation, but unless one looks at the words of the prophets further and examines them closely, they will often miss the great revelation, and they will not see how it is directly tied into the revelation of the day of YaHuWaH, Yom YaHuWaH. So in verse 25, it says that not only is this a Kodesh gathering, but no servile work is to be done. No servile work is to be done. And in Hebrew, that is melechet aboda. Melechet aboda is literally two different words describing two different types of work. Melechet literally refers to the type of work which refers to someone's business or something of their personal labors that somehow benefit them in some type of way. And then aboda refers to servantile work, even the slavery work, the type of work that a servant, an indentured servant, or someone who is of a low class, someone who is not financially as capable as others, that type of work, even that type of work, no matter how harsh the work may be or whatever it may serve, whether it be from the very top of someone's business to the person who sits in his chair and has to do basically nothing but plan the work and just, fill out forms and papers, whether it be that type of work, all the way down to the type of work that involves really hard labor. So all of it from A to Z, or Aleph to Taw, for instance, is all prohibited on the day of trumpets, because it is a day of remembrance, a day of memorializing, literally, is what that word Zikron can also mean. So it is really, it's really important that all the people are to observe it, no matter their status. And you shall bring an offering made by fire to YaHuWaH. Now, in this particular passage, we don't get any information as to what that offering made by fire is. So we have to rely upon another passage. We have to go to Bamidbar, or Numbers chapter 29, verse 1, and then here we will get more information regarding the observance of Yom Teruah, the day of the alarm. And in the 7th month, see, it reads the exact same way. In the 7th month, not the 1st month, on the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month. So on the day of the new moon, that first moment in time when the new moon is seen, when it is first visible after it has been hidden in the darkness, and it begins to form, and you can see that it is manifested over in the western sky when the sun begins to set in the evening. Because in Scripture we know that a day begins and ends in the evening, for it is written in the Scriptures. And it came to be evening, and it came to be morning the first day. Or literally in the Hebrew, YaHi Erev, YaHi Boker, Yom Echad. And the same terminology is used again and again and again to describe all the days of the Shabuah, of the week. So therefore we know that a day begins in the evening. So at the very moment the Yom begins, the Yom Teruah begins, when the new moon can be seen on that first day of the 7th new moon that happens within the year, happens within YaHuWaH's Shana, his year, according to his reckoning. Now, so this happens on the first day of the month. You have a Kodesh gathering, a Mikra Kodesh. Again, that same terminology is used. It is a rehearsal. We are preparing. We are rehearsing for a future time, for a future event. You do no servile work. It is a Yom Teruah, a day of blowing the trumpets for you. And you shall prepare a burnt offering as a YaHuWaH, which literally means a smelling or breathing in that is calming or soothing. And that calming and that soothing is always tied to the idea of a day or a time which is memorialized, or which is to be zakar, to be a remembrance. Because what it does and serves for is for a sweet memorial to YaHuWaH, as a remembrance before YaHuWaH. And today we know that our scent gland is directly tied to our memory. So here it's very important to note that Yom Teruah is a time of a sweet remembrance. So YaHuWaH is remembering the times of old. He's remembering former things. But also understand that YaHuWaH is not limited to time. Therefore, because he exists in the times of old and in the time of the future, he is all sufficient, self-existing, and not bound to the creation which he created, which is time. So therefore, his memories are not just attributed to those things which are from the past, but those things in our time that we would refer to as being in the future. YaHuWaH is not limited to such things. So therefore, his mind on Yom Teruah and his essence and everything that he is reflects upon all of the things that has happened throughout the course of time that has brought to him a sweet memorial, such as the sacrifices that were done. And whenever YaHuWaH said, and it was a sweet fragrance, or a sweet fragrance unto YaHuWaH, this is what he is referring to, a time where he reflected and remembered. So that is what this is all about. One young bull, one ram, 7 lambs, a year-old perfect one. So Yom Teruah is a time of sacrifice. And their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for the bull, 2/10 for the ram, and 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, and 1 male goat as a sin offering to make atonement for you. And besides the burnt offering with its grain offering for the Rosh Chodesh, or the new moon, the continual burnt offering with its grain offering and their drink offerings, according to their right ruling, as a YaHuWaH, as a sweet fragrance, or a sweet memorial remembrance that calms YaHuWaH from the wrath in which that he feels against the nations, against those who sin. And its grain offering and their drink offerings, according to their right ruling, as a sweet fragrance, an offering made by fire to YaHuWaH. And we know that this serves, again, as a time to memorialize the coming judgment which will happen on the Day of Atonement. As a matter of fact, it even says that there are sacrifices done on Yom Teruah to make atonement. So the process of atonement even begins here, and it begins all the way up to that 10-day interval of repentance, the call of repentance with the shofar sound, until the time of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Now let's examine the Hebrew of what it says here in this passage, so that we can compare it to what we read in Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 23, concerning the timing, just so that we are certain by 2 witnesses concerning the exact timing of Yom Teruah. U'b'chodesh hashabe'i be'achad l'chodesh. And here it says, U'b'chodesh, and in the chodesh, or the new month, the new moon, hashabe'i, of the 7th, be'achad, in the first l'chodesh, of the month. So here we see the exact same terminologies used, the exact same phrasing to describe this day, which would be a Yom Teruah, a day of the sounding of the shofar blast. Now let us go to Genesis, Bereshith chapter 1, verse 14. And it says, And Elohim said, Let lights come to be in the expanse of the Shemayim, of the heavens, to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for appointed times and for days and years. Now in the Hebrew, the term for signs is othot. It is literally spelled aleph tau, wal tau. Sometimes, however, and that's because it's in the plural, the ot on the end just implies that it's in the plural. But sometimes the singular form is spelled aleph tau, which is the first and last of the Hebrew aleph beit. And sometimes it is spelled Aleph Wal Tall with the letter Wal, which represents the nail, right in the midst of the Aleph Tall. Now the Aleph in Tall is often considered to be a place designator, but oftentimes it is translated many different things. For instance, one thing is the word sign, which means it is a signal. It is something to note. It is something to remember. So he created the signs to be something that we can see, because he said, let the lights be for the signs. He did not say, let the darkness be for the signs. Remember, YaHuWaH Elohim, he separated the light from the darkness. And so therefore, when he called to the light specifically, he designated to the light that the light would be for signs and for seasons, which is the word Moedim. And the word Moedim is a very specific word that basically usually just means an appointment, but often it is used specifically for YaHuWaH's appointed times, the times that many just refer to as feasts. So therefore, it is very significant to note that these two words appear here, that they would be for signs and for seasons, and that these times are also for days and for years. So this is how we know YaHuWaH's calendar, according to what we see in the Shemayim. We've already talked about this in great detail, so I'm not going to go through all of it. But the point of bringing this to the forefront in this study is to remind everyone that the significance of the signs in the Shemayim that we are to look for, they have to be light. Today, many people go by what is called the astronomical new moon. And this is based off of modern science. This is used by NASA. This has become, the standard for use in our culture today. However, in the ancient world, this is not so. In the ancient world, this was known as the end of the month, the time of the no moon, the time of the dark moon, the time when the moon had disappeared and there was nothing to observe in the Shemayim, in the heavens. And we know that this time can last from anywhere from 1.5 to 3.5 days. And then when the moon begins to manifest yet again, and the light hits the moon, and it is time to sound the shofar, we can see the sign. And it happens right in the evening at the beginning of a new day. Because again, remember, YaHuWaH says, YaHi Erev, YaHi Boker, Yom Echad, Yom Shnai, which means the second day, the first day, Yom Shalosh, the third day, the fourth day. Every day he said there was evening and there was morning on those days. And that there was day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. So it is simple to note that this is the time period just from the scriptures alone, because the terminology Rosh Chodesh refers to the rebuilding of the head. The word Rosh doesn't just mean the beginning or the first or the new moon, but the word Rosh means the head. And the word Chodesh means to rebuild or to renew. So if we're rebuilding or renewing the light, it has to be the very first piece of light that happens at the rebuilding of the moon phases as it is becoming full and then as it begins to wane. So it has to be within that 29.5 days of the moon being lit up by the sun. It has to be the first day that it receives its light. So it is very important to note this so that we keep the right day. Now, many people reference that modern Judaism uses what they call the astronomical new moon, but this is not true. This is actually not true. Modern Judaism is based upon the calendar that is used, and the Jewish calendar is used as a reference to the Torah calendar. It is based upon the Torah principles. But what happened is that the Yahudim were going to be kicked out of their land. The people that are called Jews, they were kicked out of their land. And because they were kicked out of their land, the elders of the Beit Din, the Sanhedrin, the court, the great court that would be in Jerusalem, they came together and decided that time could no longer be kept at the right time periods, because different people in different regions see the new moon and they see the beginning of the year at different time points. And so that all of Israel would be in discord. They would be keeping all their days on different days. So therefore they came up with a mathematical formula to try to predict the actual time period that the moon is visible. That is why they keep 2 days for the Rosh Hashanah that they call, which we call the Day of Trumpets, the time that we're talking about. They will keep this time for 2 days. That is just referenced as, it's called Yom Tov Sheni. It means the second Tov day, or the second good or great day. And they do this again because it is very hard to predict when the moon will be visible, because it can be hid from anywhere from 1.5 to 3.5 days. So the average is 2. So therefore, what they do is they keep it for 2 days to be safe while they are in the diaspora, which is the exile. So if people do their proper study, the people who are referencing this time as being the new moon, they would realize that in fact, according to YaHuWaH's word, it is the time of the no moon, it is time of the dark moon, it is the end of the month, it is not the beginning of the month. So anyway, we've referenced this in great detail already in Rosh Chodesh, in the video on Rosh Chodesh. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time in this particular video about it, but it is so imperative to the keeping of Yom Teruah that it has to be brought up. It has to be brought to the forefront. We are looking for a sign. Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 1. Guard the month of Abib. It's very simple in the English. It just seems very simple. It's not a lot there. Just guard the month of Abib. So if you can find out when Abib is, guard it. But in the Hebrew, there's so much more detail. It says, Shamar et Chodesh ha'Aviv. Shamar means to look for, to observe, to guard, and to look narrowly for, searching for. And then it is followed by the word et, the Aleph Tal, that word that we talked about that is usually called a place designator, and sometimes it is translated as such words as oath or a sign. So here we see that we're to look for the sign. What is the sign? We remember in Genesis chapter 1 verse 14, YaHuWaH created lights to be for othot, for the signs, plural, and for the Moedim. So we're looking for the sign. Shamar et Chodesh. That word Chodesh refers to the month, but it also refers to the renewal of the month. It means both things. The word Chodesh can mean to renew or to refresh. And so therefore, it means to renew and to refresh the month, to start it over again. It is interchangeable with the Hebrew word Yareach, which refers to the Yarach, which is the moon. And oftentimes Yareach is spelled Yarach, that means moon specifically. So therefore we know that these two revelations refer to the renewing of the moon. And we're going to look at that even further. So therefore we know that when the new moon is, in other words, the point of all this is that we can know for sure when YaHuWaH's appointed times are. It is not beyond our comprehension. It is not too far for us or too hard for us to grasp. It is not, some people try to make these things so complicated. They try to create these various concoctions for what they think the calendar is all about. But the reality is, it's all right here in the book. It's written very simplistically in the Hebrew, and anyone can find this information out. You can look it up in concordances. You can do things like that. And even in the English, you get enough information to know that it's in the 7th month. All the English translations say it's in the 7th month. A lot of them even translate the word Chodesh as new moon. So it's very simple to find this information. It is directly tied to the moon. YaHuWaH's calendar is in the heavens, in the Shemayim. And he also uses signs on the earth, as we've discovered, such as the Abib, the ripening of the barley heads. Because it says, to Shamar et Chodesh ha'Abib, to look for the sign of the renewal of the moon that happens during Abib, the month of Abib. Abib, that word literally means when the barley is a stage of development of barley. When the barley is in a stage of development, when its heads can be roasted with fire, yet it's still tender and green. It hasn't fully ripened, but it's ripened enough that it can be roasted on the fire as an acceptable offering to YaHuWaH. Then it is called Abib. So it is in a specific time, and that happens in what people call the spring. Okay, so that is very important to understand. We're to look for the moon that happens during that time when the barley is Abib. I have an entire teaching on this. Again, Rosh Hashanah. If you haven't looked at it, look at the video, the lesson in this series, Rosh Hashanah. And also look at Rosh Chodesh, because it talks about both of these ideas in great detail. It should also be noted that that term Rosh Chodesh, not only does it give us the raw definition in the Hebrew, in the Ivrit, of what the new moon is, But the very term Rosh Chodesh refers to the crowning of the head, the crowning of the Rosh, referring to the birthing of an infant. So when an infant comes into the world, generally it comes in head first, and that is called crowning, and that is the reference point of the Rosh Chodesh. That word Chodesh comes from the root Hadash, which means to make new. Chodesh all by itself means to refurbish and to renew and to make new. And the example that is given specifically for Chodesh is to refurbish and to make polish, referring to literally polishing a sickle which is used for harvesting grain. And this is why that the Chodesh, the new moon, that first sliver of the moon, looks like a sickle in the Shamayim. Remember, he made signs to be in the heavens, and these signs, the sign of the sickle, lets us know when the harvests are coming, because all of the feasts are dependent upon the harvest in the land. But not only this, but Rosh Chodesh has its equivalent in Aramaic as Rosha Chodesha. And Rosha in Aramaic, Aramit, not only does it mean the first point or the chief point or the beginning or the head, but it also literally means the edge of a blade or the edge of a sickle. So then in Aramaic we have more witnesses. But Rosha also means the tip of the head, the tip of the sword, and the tip of the finger, referring to the fingernail. And it is very clear that that sliver in the Shamayim, that sliver in the sky, is a picture of the fingernail. It is very obvious when you look at the Aramit, when you look at the Aramaic. So Rosha Chodesha in the Aramaic is very clear. It is the refurbishing of the tip of the blade, the refurbishing of the sickle. So in Aramaic and in Hebrew, we see the dual representation of the idea of the sickle, of the fingernail, of the blade. It continues on and on and on. And furthermore, we know that it has to be this point because, like we said before, YaHuWaH created the lights to be for the signs. So when that first sliver is seen in the western sky at evening, that will be the new moon day. That will be the first day of the month. It lasts for 24 hours from evening to evening. And then each and every day for approximately 14 to 15 days, the moon will be seen each and every night to be a little wider and a little wider until you have the full moon. And then from the point of the full moon, it can appear to the naked eye to be full anywhere from 2 to 3 days, just depending. And then it wanes away, and then there is no moon for 1.5 to 3.5 days. And because it is not always known when the sliver will be seen, the time period of waiting for the sliver is referred to in the Hebrew by an idiomatic expression, which is called a day that no man knows the day or hour. So that very familiar phrase that we have heard all of our life that refers to a day that no man knows the day or hour does not literally mean that no man could know, because we are to know the season in which our master will come, but rather is referring to Yom Teruah, the day of trumpets, which is a day that no man knows the day or hour, because we wait any time from 1.5 to 3.5 days looking. The watchman looks from the wall for the sign of the sliver, and then the two witnesses go and declare that they've seen the moon, and then it is announced by the great court. They sound the shofars, and all work ceases, and Yom Teruah begins. It is a time that no man knows the day or the hour. Well, we've seen 6 completed moon cycles. We know that the next moon cycle, the next new moon, is Yom Teruah. It is the day of trumpets. So, to reiterate the idea of the term Chodesh being tied to the month, which is Yareach, let's look at 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 2 for one example. I don't have time to go through all the examples. There are many throughout the scriptures. And all the men of Yisrael, which is Yasharel, assembled to sovereign Shlomo, which is Solomon, at the festival of the Chag in the month. And there the word is Yareach. It's not Chodesh, but it is Yareach. And then it says of Ethanim. So at this time, the 7th month was called Ethanim. And it says here, which is the 7th month. And literally it says it is the 7th Chodesh. HaChodesh Shaba'i is what it calls it right here. So here, all you have to know is that in the Torah, we are looking for what? Chodesh Shaba'i, the 7th month, the 7th new moon. That's what we're looking for. And here in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 2, we see clearly that Yareach, which means moon, is interchangeable with the word for Chodesh. So now we get the revelation fully that clearly the month is talking about the renewal of the moon, the beginning of the moon, the building of the moon cycle. We're looking for the first light that starts it. So that is the ancient new moon. That is the ancient Rosh Chodesh. It is not the astronomical new moon. Anyway, so all this is imperative to understand how to know when to look for the Yom Teruah so that we can celebrate and understand and rehearse the time of the great sounding of the alarm, which is coming. Now, the concept of Teruah is a sound, a distinct sound that is made on a trumpet. Now, there are several different Hebrew words for trumpet, and it doesn't matter which one we're referring to. In all cases, they will make the sound for Teruah in certain situations. And not only can Teruah be made by a trumpet, which is, either the silver trumpets that we see that the Kohanim would use, or the shofar, which is an animal's horn that would be used, such as the kudo horn. This is a type of shofar, or the ram's horn, which is often called a yobel. But it is also a type of shofar. So in either case, they can make the Teruah blast. The Teruah blast usually consists of 9 consecutive sounds. However, the Teruah blast can also be made with the human mouth. It is a sound of the shout, a shout of rejoicing. Sometimes it is a shout of woe and sadness, but often it is linked in the scriptures directly to rejoicing. And it comes from the root word ruah. And ruah also means a loud sound, a loud cry. And it, again, it's not an unbroken sound. It's a broken sound of 9 distinct blasts that are done to allow the people to know that it is time to wake up, and it heralds in many different situations. It is directly tied in to the shout of a sovereign, the shout of rejoicing, the shout of victory, the shout of going out to war. All these different things are directly tied into the word Teruah. So Teruah is very important, and it appears other places in the scriptures, such as in Bamidbar, Numbers chapter 10, verse 1. And YaHuWaH spoke to Moshe, saying, make 2 silver trumpets. That's Hatzot Serah, which is not the same word for shofar, which is an animal horn, such as the kudo horn or the ram's horn. However, Hatzot Serah refers to a horn that is made from some type of precious metal. In this case, it's going to be made of silver. So, nonetheless, we'll see that the Teruah sound is made on both the shofar and the Hatzot Serah. So, I just wanted to point out the distinction. But they're to make for themselves trumpets for yourself. Make them a beaten work, and you shall use them for calling the congregation and for breaking camp. And they blow, that word is taka, is where we get the word takeah for the sounding of the shofar, one of the sounds of the shofar that is associated with the 4 blasts that are done today. The takeah, which comes from taka, is literally a long sounding on the shofar. It is a long blast. So that is what it's referring to, a specific blast. It's not just when you blow, like when you make any distinct sound, any certain sound. It is a very distinct sound. It is a long blasting on the shofar. And when they blow taka, both of them, all the congregation shall meet before you at the door of the tent of meeting. And if they blow, which is that word taka again, one, then the leaders, the heads of thousands of Yisrael shall gather to you. So if they just sound the one long blast with one of the trumpets, then all of the leaders are to gather. That is at the takia or the taka. And when you blow a shout, that is tekatem teruah. Teruah is used here. When you blow a shout is how it's often translated. However, it's literally talking about when you sound the teruah, which is the blasting. It is 9 consecutive blasts, an alarm that is done to wake the people up. When you blow a shout or tekatem teruah, the camps that lie on the east side shall depart. They're going out for war. And when you blow a shout, utakatem teruah, the second time, then the camps that lie on the south shall depart. They blow a shout, a teruah, yet keyu, for them to depart. So it is really important to understand that the whole concept of teruah, according to this passage, is the concept of sending the children of Israel out to depart. YaHuWaH is called YaHuWaH Zabuot, YaHuWaH of hosts, YaHuWaH of the armies. And in this case, we see that surely he is YaHuWaH of the armies, even the armies of the earth. The children of Yisrael, of Yasharel, they are to be his army, and he is sending them out for war at the sound of the teruah blast. So we know specifically that Yom Teruah has something to do with the sending out of the armies to war. And when they assemble, when the assembly is to be assembled, verse 7, and you blow taka, but do not shout tariu, which comes from teruah. They are both of the same root word. And the sons of Aharon, the priests, blow the trumpets, and it shall be for you a law throughout your generation. So when they are assembled, they do not blow the shout, which is the teruah, but they blow what is called the takia or the taka. That is the sound. It is the sound of the long, drawn-out sound. That is the sound to assemble the people. That long, uninterrupted sound. But the teruah, those blasts, those 9 blasts on the shofar that are done very rapidly, are done to wake the people up, to announce the coming war, to send out the troops, and to prepare for the battles, to get them ready. And when you go into battle, in verse 9, in your land against the enemy that distresses you, then you shall shout, YaHuWaH, and that word comes from ruah. YaHuWaH comes from the word ruah, which gives us the word teruah. So here we know that we are to shout, and that has to do with the idea of calling out in distress. So the idea of teruah is also looking for deliverance. So it's a time when the armies are dispatched, a time of looking for the deliverance, looking for the redemption. That's what all this is pointing out to. You shall shout with the trumpets, and you shall be remembered before YaHuWaH, your Elohim, and you shall be saved from your enemies. And then the day of your gladness, and in the day of your Moadim, your appointed times, and at the beginning of your months, your Rosh Hodeshim, which again we've already seen that time period when the moon refreshes and it begins to be manifest yet again, that time of the Rosh Hodesh, they are to sound the silver trumpets. That's what the Kohanim do. That's what the priests do during this time period. It says, and at the beginning of your month you shall blow, which is taka, the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over your shalom, your peace offerings. And they shall be a remembrance for you before your Elohim. I am YaHuWaH your Elohim. Now we know in the ancient times that the people of Yasharel, when they're in the promised land, that they would look for the new moon. And when they would see the new moon, they would make their journey to the Hekal, to the temple of YaHuWaH. And there they would be questioned by the court, by two witnesses. And when the two witnesses had made their way to the Hekal, and the announcement had been made and confirmed, then a shout and a sound of the alarm would be sounded, and all the people would prepare, and all the things and all things that were being done commercially, businesses, they would all have been shut down already in preparation for the coming new moon. And so when it was confirmed, the sound of the shout would be made, and that sound would echo in the times of diaspora all the way to Babylon. This is all recorded in the histories of the Yahudim and the histories of the Jews. They keep these records concerning how the Rosh Chodesh was observed. But it was established by two witnesses. And then the great messenger would then sound the shofar. You have to remember this. This is important. And then they would sound the shofars, and then they would sound also, the priests, the Kohanim, would sound the silver trumpets, and the whole process would begin for the Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets, which was a new moon day. It was a Rosh Chodesh. So the offerings for the new moon, which were to be done each and every new moon, were done also with the offerings of the Yom Teruah. It was a major ordeal, a major time of sacrifice, a major time of rejoicing and reflecting and repentance and all these emotions that would be coming out of the people, a time of the two witnesses, a time to establish the Torah, to establish the word of YaHuWaH, to establish the appointed times of YaHuWaH. And all this would take place. Again, they would see the new moon in the evening, and that would last, the Yom Teruah would last from that evening until the next evening for 24 hours. Go from one evening to the next evening. YaHuWaH Erev, YaHuWaH Boker. And there came to be evening and there came to be morning. Again, over and over and over. This is the revelation. So Yom Teruah lasts for an entire 24-hour period. It begins in the evening. It is a time of shouting, a time to confirm the moed of YaHuWaH, the appointed time of YaHuWaH, the oath of YaHuWaH, the signal, the light in the Shamayim that we see. All these things are directly related to the Yom Teruah. Now today there are three different types of blasts that are sounded on the shofar. In the Torah, we read by name two of them specifically. We read about the takah, which today is called takeah. It's just a different form of the same exact word that we actually see also in the scriptures. And that word teruah, which is the teruah blast, which we are familiar with. We're familiar with both of those. Today there's also a third, which is called the shevarim, and it's made of 3 blasts. It is a type of teruah blast. So oftentimes it is done with the teruah blast specifically. So it is actually very important to note that there are 3, because in the services that have been done for thousands of years now by the Yahudim, on the time of Yom Teruah, they will sound the shofars and the trumpets. They will sound these 100 times according to the Ashkenazis and 101 times according to the Sephardim. And so they will do this in various orders. But what is ultimately important about the 3 is that it is followed by a 4th sound. And the 4th sound will be called, by the Ashkenazim, they do the takah gadol, which is the great last blast on the shofar that lasts and echoes for a long time, is drawn out, and it does not end. But the Sephardim end the Yom Teruah celebration, the time of the sounding of the shofar. They will end this time period by sounding the shofar, making the blast of the Teruah Gadol, which is the last great sounding of the rapid blast on the shofar. Now, either way, it is very interesting because the 4 represent YaHuWaH's name. Because in YaHuWaH's name, there are 3 letters, just like there are 3 different distinct sounds on the shofar. But the 4th one is a repeat of a previous letter. And there is emphasis on that last letter. There's emphasis on that last shofar blast. Though it is one of the previous 3, it is done louder, it is done with emphasis, it is done to announce and to awaken, and it completes the revelation of Yod, He, Wah, He. The entire idea of Yod He Wah, of YaHuWaH's 4 letters that make up his name, is directly connected interchangeably with the idea of the shofar. The 4 sounds of the shofar. Tekiah. Shevarim. Teruah. Tekiah Gadol. One of the distinct correlations with the shofar is YaHuWaH's name. And it's in the scriptures we see that oftentimes YaHuWaH, he speaks and it sounds as if it is a shofar. In the scriptures we'll see that. So it is a direct correlation. He is YaHuWaH Zabot, YaHuWaH of the armies, YaHuWaH of the sounding of the shofar blast, the sounding of the cries of war. YaHuWaH is not just the YaHuWaH Zabot, YaHuWaH of the armies on the earth, but YaHuWaH of the armies in the Shemayim. He has messengers, Malakim. People call these angels, we call them Malakim because they are not winged females with halos and things like that. Those are all of pagan origin. But YaHuWaH has messengers. He has Malakim, he has Seraphim, he has Cherubim, which people call cherubs and seraphs and all these things. He has a great army in the Shemayim in the heavens, in what people call space and beyond the space of space. He has great armies. And so what he is projected to the children of Israel on the earth is what is done in his armies in the Shemayim. So it's really important to understand all of these aspects of the shofar blast and their importance and their significance, because the Yom Teruah is the time of the awakening, the time of the cry. But Midbar, Numbers chapter 23 verse 21, it says, he has not looked upon wickedness in Yaakov, which is called, Yaakov is called Jacob by many people, nor has he seen trouble in Yisrael or Yasharel. YaHuWaH, his Elohim, is with him, and the shout of a sovereign is in him. Literally, that word shout is ha-teruah, the shout, the sound of the blasting. And it is directly tied into YaHuWaH being sovereign. When you think about a sovereign or a king, he is generally heralded in by music, by the sound of trumpets. This has been done by most cultures. The sound of the trumpet will bring in the presence of the king. He will have those that go before him. And so here we have the idea of YaHuWaH being heralded in by the sound of the shofar, by the sound of the trumpet, by the sound of the great teruah blast. But also we have the idea that YaHuWaH's own voice, his own shout, is like the shout and the sound of a trumpet, like the sound of the teruah blast. It is a sound of rejoicing, a time of victory. Because when YaHuWaH told his children to go to battle, he let them know, when you read it in the Hebrew, that when they went out to battle, they had already won the victory just by walking out to battle. And so therefore, when we look at this concept of YaHuWaH being sovereign, we know that when we sound these blasts and we echo his name, we echo those 4 sounds, that it is distinct and it brings in the presence of YaHuWaH, because he is heralded in by the sound of the shofar. His own voice, his own word is directly tied into the sound of the blasting of the teruah, of the sound to go to war. Because he is called YaHuWaH Zavot. It announces the king, it announces the sovereign, Hamelech, the Melech, the king and ruler, the one who rules and reigns forever, the sovereign of the universe. YaHuWaH is the king of the universe. We call him Melech HaOlam, the king of the ages, the king of all things. And it ushers in the king. Tehillim, Psalm chapter 47, verse 1. Oh, clap. This is the word tiku. It comes from taka. So that word taka that gives us tekiah, which is one of the sound, that long sound on the shofar or on the trumpet, is literally a picture of the idea of clapping. The reason that I'm bringing this out is because the sounds on the shofar are also used for worship. When we read in the Tehillim, in the Psalms, we will see that the shofar and the silver trumpets were used specifically to worship YaHuWaH as Kodesh instruments, as set apart instruments. So here we see the likening of our body as being an instrument that can make the sounds of the shofar. Oh, clap, tiku, your hands, all you people. Shout, Tyru, which literally comes Teruah. It literally comes from Teruah. So therefore, it is implied that when we shout, we can make the Teruah sound. So that doesn't, if you don't have a ram's horn, if you don't have a shofar sound, you can cry out with your voice. You can cry out to YaHuWaH. You can cry out in repentance. You can use your mouth to make the sound of the teruah, according to the scriptures. That word taru, it comes from literally teruah, which gets its root from ruah. Shout to Elohim with a voice of singing, for YaHuWaH Most High is awesome, a great sovereign over all the earth. So the idea again of the teruah is because YaHuWaH is the sovereign. It announces that He is His sovereignty and that He is going to rule and reign over the earth. He subdues people under us and nations under our feet. So again, this idea now tells us that He's going, when He comes, when He sends out His armies, He's going to subdue the nations under His feet. He chooses our inheritance for us, the excellence of Yaakov, whom He loves, Selah. Elohim shall go up with a shout. That word is teruah. So YaHuWaH is going to go up with a shout, a teruah. YaHuWaH with the sound of a ram's horn, with the sound of a ram's horn. Literally in Hebrew is bekal, which means the voice, in the voice. And then the word shofar. And again, we know that the shofar is a very distinct instrument because it is often associated specifically only with those animals that have been slaughtered in a kosher fashion, which are clean animals, and they have had the horn taken off and it has been hollowed out to make a wind instrument. So we know that YaHuWaH surely has not gone through this process, but what we correlate the idea of the trumpet that He is using, the voice that He is using, it sounds like that distinct sound that comes off of the animal horn, which is a specific wailing sound. So it is letting us know that when He comes, He's coming with this voice, the sound and the shout of the ram's horn, of the shofar. Now, the Torah portion that is read during Yom Teruah, which all over the world, the Yahudim and all of us who study the Torah, generally we stay on a very certain track of reading through the Torah throughout the year, and that is called the Torah portion. And during the time of Yom Teruah, the Torah portion speaks of specifically the Akedah Yitzhak, which is talking about the binding of Yitzhak, which is Isaac. Now, in the narrative, we know that Yitzhak knew that his father did not have a ram when he went up with him to the sacrifice. YaHuWaH had called out to Abraham and told him to take his beloved son, his only son Yitzhak, and to take him up Mount Moriah. And there he was to sacrifice him to YaHuWaH. And on the way, though Yitzhak knew there was no ram, he asked his father, he says, Father, he's carrying the wood, and he says, I see the wood and I see the fire, but where is the ram? And Abraham responds that YaHuWaH Elohim will provide a ram for the sacrifice. But Abraham goes up and he binds his son. This is called the Akedah. He binds Yitzhak, and Yitzhak willingly lays down his life, as it were, as the firstborn son of Abraham through Sarah, the princess, through the lineage of the royal line, that will produce the offspring that will come forth, which will be the Messiah, will come through his loins at some point through his lineage. Now YaHuWaH is asking for his blood, and what happens is Abraham goes to sacrifice his son, and then the Malach, the messenger, cries out to Abraham, do not harm your son. And there we see that YaHuWaH ransomed Yitzhak's life. He ransomed the firstborn. He ransomed that that royal son, the son of promise, which is a picture of the Messiah. And he ransomed him through the blood of a ram. And we study this during the time of Yom Teruah. And this is important because of the fact that the ram's horn, the shofar, first appears in Scripture by the use at Mount Sinai that is done by the messengers of YaHuWaH. It is not first used by a human in the Scriptures. We don't see the word shofar used with a human before Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is the revelation. Why is this that YaHuWaH is communicating with the sound of the shofar? We're going to read about this in just a moment. It is because he is echoing and reminding the people of the ransoming of Yitzhak, reminding them of the sacrifice of the ram. The entire purpose that the ram's horns were caught in the thicket were so that later this idea of the ram's horn would remind us of the sacrifice and the laying down of Yitzhak's life and the binding of his life and the substitution that would be made. And all of this points to the sufferings of the Messiah that were to come. So the entire purpose of the shofar is to echo this revelation and to announce this revelation. That is why it is studied during the time of Yom Teruah. Now, that we know that the ram's horn is a constant reminder of the Akedah, of the binding of Yitzhak. Let us go to Shemoth, Exodus chapter 19, verse 16. And it came to be on the third day, in the morning, that there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud on the mountain. Now again, remember Yitzhak was taking up a mountain. He was taking up Mount Moriah. Now, on the mountain, it says, and the sound of the ram's horn was very loud. The sound of the shofar was very loud. This is the first time that we see the word shofar in all of Scripture. And it says, and all the people who were in the camp trembled. And the ram's horn ushers in the word of YaHuWaH. We see it in verse 19. And when the blast of the ram's horn sounded long and became louder and louder, Moshe spoke, and Elohim answered him by voice. So the sound of the shofar is not just a sound that brings in and tells the people to come in and gather together and sends them out to war and prepares for the coming of the king and all these various things. But here we see that the shofar sound ushers in the words of YaHuWaH. It ushers in the very Dabar YaHuWaH, which is the word of YaHuWaH. Often through the prophets we see the terminology, the Dabar YaHuWaH came unto me saying, the word of YaHuWaH came unto me saying. And when we see that, we know that this is the manifestation and the likeness and the form of YaHuWaH who actually appeared to the prophets. And this form is called the Dabar YaHuWaH, the word of YaHuWaH. But on Mount Sinai, they saw no form, but they heard the sounding of the ram's horn, and they heard the voice and the word of YaHuWaH, and he spoke, and it ushered in his presence. So it's very important to note this. Now, a yobel, the word yobel, literally, as we spoke of earlier, is a ram's horn. We see that in verse 13, that the sound that they heard came from a yobel. It came from a ram's horn. It says, not a hand is to touch it, but he shall certainly be stoned or shot with an arrow. Whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the yobel, when the trumpet sounds long, let them come near the mountain. This is often, again, translated ram's horn because it literally is a ram's horn that has been turned into a wind instrument that makes an alarming sound to let the people know. And YaHuWaH made this sound, the sound of the ram's horn, at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, and it ushered in his word. It ushered in his presence. Vayikra, Leviticus 25, verse 8. We see about the Jubilee. The word Jubilee comes from the word Yobel, which is a ram's horn. This is what we read. And you shall count 7 Shabbathot, 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself. So a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that there are Sabbath years. We have discovered this. We have been talking about this throughout this entire lesson. We talked about it in the Sabbath lessons. So it's an obvious revelation that there are Sabbath years. Every seventh year is a Sabbath year. So they number for themselves 7 Sabbath years, and the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall give to you 49 years. That's just basic math. 7 times 7 gives you 49. And then you shall sound a ram's horn. You make the shofar teruah, is what it literally says. Shofar teruah. So they would make the sound of the teruah blast, which are those 9 consecutive blasts that wake the people up, to pass through on the 10th day of the 7th month on Yom Kippur. Cause a ram's horn to pass throughout all your land. This is the word Yobel. So the word Jubilee gets its term from Yobel. That's what it means. We think of Jubilee means rejoicing and all these things, and it does. But literally, the Jubilee is sounded, the Yobel is sounded on the 10th day of the 7th month, which is Yom Kippur, during the 49th day, the 49th year before the 50th, which is the Jubilee. So on the 49th year, on the day of Yom Kippur, the day of atonement, they sound the teruah blast to let the people know that the 50th year is coming, and that the Yobel, the year of the Yobel, the Jubilee, the 50th year, is approaching. It says in verse 10, and you shall set the 50th year apart and proclaim release throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It is a Yobel. It is a Jubilee to you. And each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you return to his clan. So the whole reason of reading this and talking about the Jubilee and bringing it into the study on Yom Teruah is to bring in the idea of the fact that the Yom Teruah not only is a picture of the coming of the sovereign, a time that he dispatches his armies, the armies of the heavens, the armies of the Shemayim, to come to war, but it's also to let us know that it is a time that will fulfill what we call the Messianic age, or the time that the Messiah rules and reigns from Mount Zion, and the Torah goes forth to all the corners of the earth from his mouth. And we know that this will take place because this is the revelation that comes forth from the prophets. But the Jubilee year is a time of release, a time of letting the captives go free, a time of letting the debts be released. All these various things is a time of redemption. And so we see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, because the day of YaHuWaH begins in darkness. But the day of YaHuWaH, it is likened to 1,000 years, because the scriptures say that 1,000 years to YaHuWaH is as one day, and one day is as 1,000 years. So therefore, when we talk about this time period that's to come, the great Sabbath year, the 1,000-year reign of the Messiah that's coming, it is also a picture of the Yobel of the Jubilee. And it is going to be a fulfillment of the Jubilee, of the Yobel, of the time of the shofar sound. But it is directly related to the sound of Teruah, which is done on Yom Teruah. Because Yom Teruah is chained together by 10 days to Yom Kippur, to the announcement of the Jubilee year, to the announcement of the coming of Messiah, to the announcement of the great and terrible day of judgment that is at hand. So this is what all this is pointing to. Also, it is important to note that many wars were won by just the sounding of the shofar. For instance, the walls of Jericho. The walls of Jericho, they are a picture of the Tower of Babylon, the Whore of Babylon, the beast system, and all these things. And the walls came tumbling down when Yahushua, which is a picture of Yahushua the Messiah, Yahushua, who is called Joshua, led the children of Israel around the walls of Jericho 7 times, and they shouted, which is the word teruah, and they sounded the shofars. They sounded the shofars and the trumpets, and the walls came tumbling down. So it is a time of redemption. So the Yom Teruah is not just a picture of the coming of the Messiah, the coming of the King. It is not just a picture of the going out to war and the great and terrible dark day of YaHuWaH, nor is it just a picture of the time that is coming when the Messiah rules and reigns, but it is also a picture of the time that he destroys the empires of the earth and he judges them and blots them out forever. That is what we are to gain and to understand from this. Also, Gideon, who is called Gideon, he also defeated the Midianites with the sounds of the shofar. So it is really important to note these things so that we understand the role that Yom Teruah has in the great scheme of prophetic events that are happening all around us. Joel, YaHuWaH chapter 2 verse 1 says, blow a ram's horn in Zion and sound an alarm, sound a teruah in my Kodesh mountain. Let the inhabitants of the earth tremble, for the day of YaHuWaH is at hand. It is coming. For it is near, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness, like the morning clouds spread over the mountain. So we know that the time of YaHuWaH, the day of YaHuWaH, comes at the sounding of the alarm. We're to sound the ram's horn in Zion, lift up the trumpet sound, lift up the teruah blast, let the people know that the day of YaHuWaH is coming. That is why in Ezekiel chapter 33 we read about the watchman on the wall. The watchman was told, Ezekiel was told, O son of man, I've made you a watchman on my wall. When you see the sword come and you don't let the people know, then I'll require it at your hand. But if you let the people know, then their blood is on their own hands. And that is the message that YaHuWaH is telling us. We have our eyes open. We are awake. We are aware. We've heard the sound, the call from the Messiah, from the Mashiach. We've heard the call of YaHuWaH in these last days, and we know. And so therefore, those of us who know and are awake, brothers and sisters, it is your opportunity and your obligation to sound the teruah blast, to lift up your voice and spare it not, to let the people know the sword is coming, the pestilence is coming, the famine is coming, darkness and gloom and all the things that the prophet spoke of will come to pass. But at the end of that dark and terrible tunnel, there is light, because YaHuWaH will set up his Malkut. He will set up his kingdom, his reign on the earth. And that is what the entire revelation of Yom Teruah is pointing to. Now, what is the solution in Joel chapter 2 to this dark and terrible day? In verse 32 we read, it shall be that all that call on the name of YaHuWaH shall be delivered. They shall be saved. That Hebrew word is actually yimalet. It means they will narrowly escape. They will narrowly escape. But they will escape. They will be saved. Zephaniah chapter 1 verse 14. Near is the great day of YaHuWaH, near and hurrying greatly, the noise of the day of YaHuWaH. Let the mighty man then bitterly cry out. That day is a day of wrath, a day of distress or tribulation and trouble, a day of waste and ruin, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of the ram's horn and alarm. It is Yom Teruah, Yom Shofar, YaTeruah. It is a day of the shofar and teruah. So we know that YaHuWaH's great and terrible day is linked directly to Yom Teruah, because here it says it is a day of the shofar and teruah. It is a day of the teruah. So it is a Yom Teruah, Yom Shofar, YaTeruah, against the walled cities and against the corner towers. And I shall bring tribulation or distress on men, and they shall walk like blind men, because they have sinned against YaHuWaH, and their blood shall be poured out like dust on their flesh, like dung. Neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of YaHuWaH. And by fire of his jealousy, all the earth shall be consumed, for he makes a sudden end of all those who dwell on the earth. Zephaniah chapter 2 verse 3. Seek YaHuWaH, all you meek ones of the earth, who have done his right ruling. Seek righteousness, seek meekness, if so it be that you are hidden in the day of the wrath of YaHuWaH. So Zephaniah, he gives us the solution in chapter 2. We know in chapter 1 the darkness is coming. But chapter 2 says that if the meek ones seek YaHuWaH, he will hide them in that dark and terrible day that is coming. Zechariah chapter 9 verse 14. Zechariah chapter 9 verse 14. And YaHuWaH shall appear for them, and his arrow go forth like lightning. And the Master YaHuWaH sound the ram's horn, and he shall go with the whirlwinds from the south. YaHuWaH of hosts shall shield them, and they shall devour and trample on sling stones. And they shall drink roar is with wine, and they shall be filled with basins, with corners of the altar. And YaHuWaH, their Elohim, shall save them in that day as the flock of his people for the stones of a diadem, sparkling over his land. So the time of YaHuWaH is not just a time where he destroys the nations. It's a time where he shepherds his people, where he brings back his people, and he begins to rule over them. Yashayahu, Isaiah 27, verse 12. And in that day it shall be that YaHuWaH threshes, and the channel of the river of the Wadi of Mitzrayim, and you shall be gathered one by one, O children of Israel. And in that day it shall be that a great horn, a great shofar is blown, and those who are perishing in the land of Asher, which is Syria of today, and the outcasts who are in the land of Mitzrayim, which is Egypt of today, shall come and shall worship YaHuWaH on the Kodesh mountain in Yerushalayim. So not only do we know that the day of YaHuWaH is coming, but the great shofar sound that is going to come according to the prophet Yeshayahu, who is Isaiah, it will gather the outcast of Israel. It's going to gather the children of Yisrael. They will be gathered one by one, says YaHuWaH. Now further, if we go to Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, it says, now at that time, Mikael shall stand up, the great head who is standing over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of tribulation or distress, such as never was, since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, this is talking about the children of Israel, shall be delivered, each and every one who is found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall wake up, some to everlasting life and some to reproaches everlasting. So the prophets let us know that this time of the gathering is also a time of the resurrection. Yashayahu, Isaiah 26, verse 19. Let your dead live together with my dead body. Let them arise. Awake and sing, you who dwell in the dust. For your dew is a dew of light, and let the earth give birth to the departed spirits. Go, my people, enter your rooms, and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself, as it were, for a little while, until the displeasure is past. For look, YaHuWaH is coming out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their crookedness, and the earth shall disclose their blood, and no longer cover her slain. So we know this time is coming, that YaHuWaH will raise those who are in the graves, and that Yom Teruah heralds in this time, the time of YaHuWaH, the day of YaHuWaH, where all of these things shall happen. Now, one thing I want to note before we go into the fulfillment of the words of the prophets, and we look into these words even deeper, is to talk about what is done on Yom Teruah, on the Day of Trumpets, by the Orthodox Yahudim. Because what we discussed previously is that the Ashkenazim, they blow 100 sounds on the shofar. The Sephardim, they do 101 sounds. These are comprised of 3 sounds, the 4th sound being repeated again for a loud, great sound, the great sound of the trumpet, like we see in Isaiah. This refers to the great sound of the trumpet at the end of Yom Teruah. But what is read during this time of the sounding of trumpets by the Orthodox Yahudim is very interesting. It comes from their own prayer book on Rosh Hashanah. And it says, may it be your will that the Tekiah Shavarim Teruah Tekiah blast that we sound be embroidered into the heavenly curtain by the appointed angel or messenger. We call it messenger. The translation that I was reading from said angel. I apologize. So Malach. Just as you accept prayers from Eliyahu, who is Elijah, who is remembered for Tov or good. And then it puts Yeshua, which is the shortened form of Yahushua, the Kohen HaGadol, minister of the inner chamber. And here it calls him Sha'ar HaPanayim, which we know means the messenger of the face, the prince of the face of YaHuWaH, which is the one who declared the revelation to Moshe and to the prophets. He was the messenger. He was the one who appeared in the likeness and form of YaHuWaH, who appeared to the elders, all these things. And this is what is written concerning him. And here it calls him by the name of Yahushua in the prayers. And it says, and the ministering Malach, that you be filled with mercy upon us. Baruch are you, master of mercies. Now, the reason this is important is because, as we know, Orthodox Yahudim do not accept Yahushua today. But what we see is that somewhere down the line, someone and a group of them must have, in times past, for it to have found its way in the prayer book, because today the rabbis have no answer as to why Yahushua's name appears in this prayer that they do each and every Yom Teruah. Each and every Yom Teruah, he is acknowledged as being the prince of the presence of the face of YaHuWaH himself. Each and every time. So that is important to note. Now let us go to the Brit Hadashah, the renewed covenant, and read what it says concerning the festivals. In Colossians chapter 2, verse 16, it says, "Let no one therefore judge you in eating or in drinking or in respect of a festival or a new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow of which is to come, but the body of the Messiah." So you don't allow anyone to judge you in the fact that you observe the Sabbath, that you keep the new moons, and that you drink the wine and you partake in these things that YaHuWaH has ordained for us to do during the new moons and the Sabbaths and the feast days. Don't let anyone judge you except for the body of the Messiah. But further, he says, these things are shadows of things to come. We are rehearsing for something that is yet to unfold. We are rehearsing for a future event. So therefore, let us go to Jeremiah 23, verse 7, and read about this future event. "Therefore, see, the days are coming, declares YaHuWaH, when they shall say no more, as YaHuWaH lives, who brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Mizraim, but as YaHuWaH lives, that brought up the seed of the house of Israel out of the land of the north, and from all the lands where I have delivered them, and they shall dwell on their own soil." So we know that YaHuWaH will gather them, that they've been sent out into the north, they've been sent to the four corners of the earth, and he's going to gather them. This is the same event that takes place in Isaiah Yeshayahu chapter 27 that we read about, the great sound of the trumpet. It will be that he gathers the outcasts of Israel, the ones who are in Syria and in Mitzrayim, which is Egypt. They will be gathered at the great sound of the shofar, and that all the other people, all of YaHuWaH's people who are spread out throughout the lands, they will be gathered at the sound of the shofar. So when the scriptures tell us it is a Mikra Kodesh, a set-apart gathering and rehearsal, and Shaul, who is called Paul, tells us that it is in fact a shadow picture of something great that is to come, we know what it is. It's obvious in the scriptures that it is a picture of all these things. But further, if we go to the book of Revelation, chapter 8, verse 6, it says, "And the seven messengers who held the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound." In chapter 10, verse 5 of Revelation, it says, "And the messenger whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land lifted up his right hand to the Shamayim, and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created the heaven and what is in it, and the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it. And there shall be no further delay. But in the days of the sounding of the seventh messenger, when he is about to sound, the secret of Elohim shall be ended, as he declared to his servants, the prophets." So now we have an outline of the future events for certainty. We know that it's all these events are tied into the Yom Teruah. They're tied into the day of the sounding of the alarm, tied into the shofar blast, tied into the idea of the coming of the king, the departing for war, the preparing for battle, all these things. But now we see clearly even further that there are seven messengers, seven malakim, in the heavens, in the Shamayim, who are about to sound their seven trumpets that have been given to them by YaHuWaH. Now let us read about this last great trump, because in Isaiah Yeshayahu 27 we have already discovered that it will be at the sound of the great trumpet, which is always the last sound. So it will be the last messenger, the seventh one, that is the gathering of the outcasts of Israel. So now let us see what we can discover about this final trump, this last trumpet sound, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 49. "And as we have borne the likeness of the earthy, we shall also bear the likeness of the heavenly. This I say, brothers, that flesh and blood is unable to inherit the reign of Elohim. Neither does corruption inherit incorruption. See, I speak a secret to you, that is a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. At the last trump, that is the great shofar blast that Isaiah was speaking of. YaHuWaH prophesied in chapter 27 concerning at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible has to put on incorruption, and this mortal has to put on immortality. And when this corruption has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall come to be the word that was written, death is covered up or swallowed up in overcoming. O death, where is your sting? O grave, where is your overcoming? And the sting of death is the sin, and the power of the sin is given because of the Torah. Because the Torah tells us what is sin. But thanks to Elohim, who gives us the overcoming through our Master Yahushua Messiah. So here we see clearly that at the time of the final trumpet is the time of the resurrection that Daniel prophesied concerning in chapter 12. And here Shaul tells us it'll happen at the sounding of the seventh messenger, at the time of the very end. Now let's go Matthew 24 verse 27. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines to the west, so also shall the coming of the Ben Adam, the son of Adam, be. For wherever the dead body is, your version may say wherever the body is. Look it up in the Greek, look it up in the Aramaic. The word there means corpse, it means a dead body. Wherever the dead body is, there the eagles is often how it's translated. However, if you look it up in the Greek and the Aramaic, as I said previously, you will see clearly that the word should be buzzards. For wherever the dead body or the corpse is, there the buzzards shall be gathered together. And immediately after the distress, that is the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from the heavens, and the power of the heavens shall be shaken. And then the sign of the Ben Adam, the son of Adam, shall appear in the Shemayim, in the heavens. And then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn. And they shall see the Ben Adam, the son of Adam, the son of man, coming in the clouds of the heaven with power and much esteem. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of the trumpet. Not just a sound, but the sound of the great trumpet. It is the trumpet sound that happens at the very end. Remember what it says. It says immediately after the tribulation of those days. But yet in Christianity today, they teach a pre-tribulational rapture. They say that before there will be distress, before there will be tribulation, that there will be a time where the Messiah will pull up the people out of the earth. They'll just come up, they'll just go up, and this is going to be somehow linked to the resurrection as well. They call it the rapture. But this is not what we see in the scriptures. But rather we see that the Messiah says immediately after the tribulation of those days, then he sends out his messengers, and then they sound that great sound of the trumpet, that final sounding of the trumpet. And when they sound that final sound of the trumpet, it says that they shall be gathered together, his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. This is the same exact event that Isaiah YaHuWaH was speaking of. At the great sound of the trumpet, the outcasts of Israel will be gathered. All those who've joined the covenant, they shall be gathered. That's what it's speaking of. Truly, Matthew, Matithyahu, chapters 24 and 25 deserves its own proper study. But if we go to verse 36 of chapter 24, it says, but concerning that day and that hour, no one knows, not even the messengers, the Malachim of the heavens, but my Father only. Now here we see the idiomatic expression for the day that no man knows the day or the hour. Yahushua is actually letting us know here when the exact time is. See, the time of Yom Teruah happens on a day that no man knows the day or hour, because the moon is hidden from 1.5 to 3.5 days before it is seen again, before the new moon is revealed. And in chapter 25, we see an elaborate amount of information regarding the time of the harvest, regarding the wise and the foolish virgins. And I can't go through all the information now, but it says in chapter 25 that the bridegroom comes at the midnight hour, and there is a great shout that announces his arrival. When YaHuWaH said that no man knows except my Father, he is also giving another idiomatic expression, which is involved in the betrothal of a bride in ancient Israel. The bridegroom would announce that no man knows the day of his arrival, because he is going to go and prepare a place for his bride. And only when the Father has inspected that structure which he has built for his bride, then the Father will announce it is time to go and to get your bride. And then he will go, and there will be the sound of the shouts and the trumpets that will announce his coming. YaHuWaH is coming as the bridegroom. He is coming for his bride. He is coming at the midnight hour. He is coming in a day that no man knows the day or the hour. The day of trumpets, Yom Teruah, is when he will come and take his people to be with him forever and ever. And that happens immediately after the tribulation of those days, not immediately before, but immediately after the tribulation. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13. Now, brothers, we do not wish you to be ignorant concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you be sad as others who have no expectation. For if we believe that YaHuWaH died and rose again, so also Elohim shall bring with him those who sleep in YaHuWaH. For this we say to you by the word of the Master, that we, the living, who are left over at the coming of the Master, shall in no way go before those who are asleep. Because the Master himself shall come down from the Shemayim with a shout, with a teruah, with the voice of a chief messenger, and with the trumpet of Elohim. And the dead in Messiah shall rise first. And we, the living who are left over, shall be caught away together with him in the clouds to meet the Master in the air. And so we shall always be with the Master. So then encourage one another with these words. But it does not say we will always be with the Master in the air, because the kingdom of the heavens is coming to the earth. YaHuWaH told us how to pray. He says, our Father who is in the Shemayim, Kodesh, or set apart is your name. Let your kingdom, your Malkut, come. Let your will be done on the earth as it is in the heavens. So it has to be done on the earth. His kingdom is coming to the earth. We're preparing for the coming of the Messiah's reign on the earth. Revelation chapter 11. We read about the two witnesses in verse 3. Now remember, this is symbolic, because the celebration of Yom Teruah in the times of old would require two witnesses that would come and announce that they had seen the sign of the Rosh Chodesh, of the new moon. And so therefore, the announcing of the two witnesses and the confirming of this, the shofar would sound. Now listen to what happens here. In Revelation chapter 11, verse 3. And I shall give unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clad in sackcloth. And when they have ended their witness, the beast coming up out of the pit of the deep shall fight against them and overcome them and kill them. And their dead bodies lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Mizraim, where also our Master was impaled. And some of the people and tribes and tongues and nations see their dead bodies for 3.5 days, and not allow their dead bodies to be placed in tombs. And those dwelling on the earth rejoice over them and exult, and they shall send gifts to each one another, because these two prophets tortured those dwelling on the earth. And after the 3.5 days, a ruach of life, spirit of life from Elohim, entered into them. And they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. And they heard a voice, a loud voice from the Shemayim, the heavens, saying to them, come up here. And in that hour there came to be a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. And in the earthquake 7,000 men were killed. And the rest became afraid and gave esteem to the Elohim of the heaven. The second woe is past, and see, the third woe is coming speedily. And the seventh messenger sounded, and there came to be loud voices in the heavens saying, the reign of the world has become the reign of the Master and the Messiah, and he shall rule and reign forever and ever. So here we see clearly that at the sounding of the seventh trumpet, that this is all correlated to the idea of the resurrection of the two witnesses. The two witnesses, they hear a shout, they hear a teruah, then they hear the trumpet blast, and they're called up into the heavens. But here we see clearly, not only this, but this is the time of separation, because the other people of the earth had already taken a stand against YaHuWaH. And they had already begun to wage war against YaHuWaH, therefore they rejoiced over the death of the two witnesses. But the two witnesses shall rise, and at the seventh trumpet blast, the mystery of Elohim shall be ended. As it says, and the reign of this world has become the reign of the Master and his Messiah, and he shall rule and reign forever. Revelation 16:13. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits, as frogs, for they are spirits of demons, doing signs which go out to the sovereigns of the entire world, to gather them to battle, for the great day of YaHuWaH the Almighty. See, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who is staying awake and guarding his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And they gathered them together to the place called in Hebrew Har Megiddo. That place, Har Megiddo, is called Armageddon. People have abstract thoughts about Armageddon. They talk about the great Armageddon that's coming. They link it to the terminology that they've used called apocalypse. The apocalypse means the unveiling, but they use all these things in conjunction to any kind of doomsday event that could take place. They'll call it Armageddon, they'll call it the apocalypse. But both of these terminologies are used specifically by talking to the coming of the Messiah. Har Megiddo, or Armageddon, is where the people will fight. All the nations of the earth will be gathered there by these 3 unclean spirits. People will probably call them angels, or they'll call them aliens, or whatever. Who knows? It doesn't even matter. It's completely irrelevant. But these 3 unclean spirits will mislead the nations to come and fight at Har Megiddo, at Armageddon, at the time of the end. Now, let's go to Revelation 19, verse 11. And I saw the heaven open, and there was a white horse, and he who sat on him was called Trustworthy and True. And in righteousness he judges and fights. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, having a name that was written, which no one had perceived or understood except himself. That does not mean he comes in a name that no one knows. It means that he is the only one who truly understands the deepest significance of his name, that no one knew except himself, and having been dressed in a robe dipped in blood. And his name is called the Word of YaHuWaH, Dabar YaHuWaH. That is the manifestation of YaHuWaH, the Messiah. The word Dabar not only means a word, but it also means a manifestation. Dabar YaHuWaH is his name. And the armies in the Shemaim, the heavens, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that it should smite the nations. And he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron. And he treads the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of El Shaddai. And on his robe and on his banner is written, Sovereign of sovereigns and Master of masters. And I saw one messenger standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying, To all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, come and gather together for the supper of the great Elohim. Come and gather together for the great supper of Elohim. Eat the flesh of sovereigns and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of strong ones, and the flesh of horses, of those who sit on them, and the flesh of the people, free and slave, both small and great. And I saw the beasts and the sovereigns of the earth and their armies gathered together to fight him who sat on the horse with his army. And the beast was seized, with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he led astray those receiving the mark of the beast and those worshiping his image. The two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, burning with sulfur. But listen to this part. And the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse. And all the birds were filled with their flesh. YaHuWaH the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he's going to announce the reign of YaHuWaH. The sounding of the shofar shall take place. Remember that Teruah blast, it's not just to gather the people. It's also to dispatch the armies of the heavens. At Armageddon, at Har Megiddo, YaHuWaH HaMashiach will come and he will show up. He will fight and he will destroy those who came to war against him. And all the kings and the sovereigns of the earth and the leaders, they will be eaten by the birds. Their flesh, their corpse will be eaten and consumed by the birds. But when YaHuWaH comes at the time of Yom Teruah, remember the great and terrible day of YaHuWaH according to Zephaniah. It is a Yom of the shofar and a Yom of the Teruah. It is Yom Teruah, the day of trumpets. This prophetic feast is not just a time that announces the sovereign, it's a time that announces that he's coming to war at Har Megiddo. And at this place, at this appointed time, the Teruah blast shall sound. YaHuWaH shall raise those who are dead. The resurrection of the righteous shall take place. They will meet the Messiah in the air. They will be with him as he is coming to the earth to rule and reign and to destroy those people who are coming to fight against him. This is the layout of Yom Teruah. This is what is going to happen. There is no pre-tribulational rapture. It does not happen this way. What happens is, YaHuWaH said, immediately after the tribulation of those days, then he shall send out his messengers to the four corners of the earth. Yeshayahu said it will be at the sound of the great shofar. We know that is the last sound. The book of Revelation tells us there are seven messengers that will sound. And at the time of the seventh messenger, that the two witnesses rose up, those two prophets, they had their resurrection. And this is all laid out in the scriptures so simplistically. And even in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, it tells us clearly at the last trump. We know it's at the seventh trump. Now let's go to the book of Luke chapter 17, in verse 33. Whoever seeks to save his life shall lose it, and whoever loses his life shall preserve it. I say to you, in that night there shall be two in one bed. The one shall be taken, and the other shall be left. Two women shall be grinding together. The one shall be taken, and the other shall be left. Two shall be in the field. The one shall be taken, and the other shall be left. Now the Christians use this verse to explain the pre-tribulational rapture, that they will be taken away before the tribulation or the distress even happens. But listen to what this verse is actually talking about in verse 37. And they answering said to him, Where, Master? And he said to them, Where the body is, there also the vultures and the buzzards shall be gathered together. That word body means corpse, wherever their corpse is. The buzzards and the vultures shall be gathered together to eat their flesh, because they're coming to battle at Har Megiddo. At this time, half of the population of the earth is going to be drafted to go to war. They're going to be taken to the battle. And when they come, that their dead body will be consumed by the birds of the earth, because the messengers will be calling to the birds to come and to eat the flesh of kings of the earth and all those who've been led astray by those unclean spirits. And they've been led to come to the great and terrible battle that begins, the great and awesome day of YaHuWaH, when the trumpets blast, when the shofar sounds, when the Mashiach comes, the word of YaHuWaH, who is YaHuWaH HaMashiach, and he rules and reigns, but he will first crush his enemies and destroy the Babylon and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and it will never rise up again, and their abominations never be remembered again before YaHuWaH as they are destroyed. We go to Revelation chapter 20, just to bring all this to a closure. In Revelation chapter 20, verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they that sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to YaHuWaH and because of the word of Elohim, and because of the word of Elohim, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands. And they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. And this is the 1,000-year day of YaHuWaH, which begins in darkness. It begins in the darkness and the tribulation of those days when the shofar sounds and YaHuWaH judges the earth. But it ends in the ruling and reigning of the Messiah who rules and reigns for 1,000 years. But listen to what it says. He saw thrones, and those who sat on them were those who were beheaded for the testimony of Yahushua, those who did not receive the mark of the beast. But in Christianity, they teach that all of the Christians will be whisked away before the mark of the beast is ever revealed. They teach that the spirit of Yahuwah, the Ruach of Yahuwah, will be removed. But we saw in the previous chapters in Revelation that it is the Spirit of Yahuwah that gives the two witnesses life again, and it gives them the ability to prophesy and the ability to do signs and wonders. So truly the Ruach of Yahuwah, the wind and breath of Yahuwah, is not going anywhere. That's not what this is saying. This is not what this is revealing. Brothers and sisters, we have to get ready. When the darkness gets darker, the light must shine brighter. We must know what the word teaches. We must be prepared for what is going to happen. And this pre-tribulational rapture idea is a fabrication. It is a lie. It was concocted by the Roman Catholic Church. It is not truth. The very word rapture is Latin. It is not found in the Hebrew or Greek at all. At all. We have to snap out of this, because those who sit on the thrones are those who refuse the mark of the beast. That means they had to be there to have the option of receiving the mark of the beast. And listen to what it says. It says, and they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years, and the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Baruch and Kodesh, or blessed and set apart, is the one having part in the first resurrection. The second death possesses no authority over these. They shall be priests of Elohim and Messiah, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. And we know there's a second resurrection. So there's only 2 resurrections. There's not 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different events and all this different stuff, all these different things that all the false prophets try to teach and try to concoct. There are 7 messengers with 7 trumpets. They sound the trumpets. At the 7th trump, the dead will rise. Those who are in Messiah shall rise. This will happen. And then the Messiah shall rule and reign. This is the ushering in of Yom Teruah. So Yom Teruah is a rehearsal. And one day we will speak of this event as the time that Yahuwah Elohim brought all of his people out of the 4 corners of the earth, just as the prophet spoke of. That we'll no longer just say Yahuwah who brought us out of Mitzrayim, but Yahuwah brought us out of all the lands where we were scattered. And this will be during the time of Yom Teruah, the time of the shofar blast. It's time to repent. It's time to get our lives in order. It's time to get prepared, because the great and terrible day of YaHuWaH is vastly approaching, and it is time to sound that trumpet. All you watchmen on the walls, it is time to get ready to sound that cry, to let the people know. Lift up your voice like a trumpet and spare not. Reveal to them their sins before the calamity comes upon them. That is what Yom Teruah is all about. The coming of the King, the coming of the Messiah, the redemption of the Messianic age, the starting of the Yom of YaHuWaH, the day of YaHuWaH, the great and terrible day of YaHuWaH. It's a picture of his own name, the 4 letters or the 4 sounds. All these things we must bear in witness, because the great sound will come, and all the things that we have done will be revealed. The books will be opened. We will be judged on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which is the very next topic for our series. So please, I pray that you will watch this video, take notes over and over again, but also stay tuned, because we are going to examine Yom Kippur, the Day of the Covering, the Day of Atonement. Shalom, shalom. YaHuWaH be with you and seal you in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. Amen.
YaHuWaH thundered from the heavens. YaHuWaH thundered from the heavens. The Most High sent forth his voice.